What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lark in Texas, once again, standing in for our friend Michael. I understand Michael's going to be back on Monday, so he's had, I hope, sufficient enough R&R to recover from the big move from Hawaii back to the mainland. And so I have a few surprises for y'all today. As you know, I'm the world's worst radio host. And so I didn't want anyone to suffer just having to listen to my voice. Bear in mind, of course, that you can call in. This is Talk Radio. The number is 800-313-9443. And of course, today is March 19th, 2020. This is what really happened with the from the republicbroadcasting.org network. I don't know if y'all realize it today, but today's the first day of spring. And amidst the hubbub of the novel coronavirus and the globalist agenda afoot, the panic that seems to have spread its wings across the lands, I am so glad that today's the first day of spring, and I hope that y'all are too. So I want to share a little bit of something about spring, where it came from, the word, and so forth. Just to begin the broadcast, I want you to know that we're going to bring up Mark Windows once again, windowsontheworld.net, and he's going to help me get through. But the thing to know about spring is that originally it was known as Lent, or the Lenten season, which came from the Old English lengthen, which means to make longer or greater in length. Yep. So we just brought in Mark. Mark is waiting in the wings. I hope you can hear me, Mark.
Oh, hi, Lark. Yes, I can hear you.
Very good. I'm sharing with the listeners for a moment before I formally introduce you, something about spring, given this is the first day of spring. So to continue,
Okay.
it's no surprise that the season was originally named after the fact that the days were getting longer. After all, back then, natural sunlight and candlelight would have been the only light sources available. So it was probably pretty exciting to see a change in the season. So we ask, when did spring get sprung? It was not until the 1300s that the term Lent was replaced by springing time, since it was the time of year when most plants that had been dormant over the fall and winter finally began to grow again, or spring from the earth. The season went through a few more name changes over the 2 centuries that followed, becoming shortened to springtime before arriving at what we now know it as spring. So spring is more than just a season. It is also a verb that means to rise, to leap, to move. As in, the morning I spring out of bed as soon as I open my eyes, or to describe an object being released from a constrained position. As in, when I finally managed to open the jammed utensil drawer, my spatula sprang out. It can also be used when talking about a body of water. We went to the hot springs while we were on vacation. I've never seen such clear water. The word spring originated prior to the 900s and has roots in the Old English springan, S-P-R-I-N-G-A-N, and the Old Norse springa as well. So is it capital S spring or is it lowercase spring? When used by itself to describe the season, you should not capitalize the S in spring. You only need to give it the uppercase treatment when it appears at the beginning of a sentence or when it is part of a proper noun or title. For example, when a person named Spring travels to saltwater springs for spring break, the S should be capitalized each time. However, when it comes to writing about your love of spring flowers or your fondness for the pastels that are popular during springtime, you should stick with the lowercase s. So Other words for spring would be the equinox or the vernal equinox. So unlike the solstice, which is used to mark the changeover to winter and summer, spring and fall have an equinox, which means a time when day and night are approximately equal length. If you're feeling quite fancy, you can call the first day of spring, that's today, the vernal equinox. Vernal comes from the Latin word vernus and means pertaining to spring. You can have vernal sunshine during the spring or admire some of spring's vernal greenery, also known as plants. If you're not feeling fancy, you can call spring mud season like they do in the northeastern U.S. April showers may bring May flowers, but they also bring puddles, muck, and mud. So anyway, welcome, Mark. How are you?
I'm okay, Lark.
I want
I'm
you to
all
know,
right.
I just got finished watching the Virus of the Globalist Mind on YouTube. And that was fantastic. In under 1 hour, that is about as concise a definition, a laying out, if you will, of the globalist agenda that I've heard in a while. It's quite good. I put a link in the chat room, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. You can join us in the chat room. What really happened? .chatango.com. What really happened? .chatango.com. I've already signed in as an American. You can too. And anyway, other than that, Mark, you've been quite busy lately.
I certainly have, Lark. And we did a show last night with Jerry Marzinski, who's a psychiatric practitioner from Tucson, and on a slightly different subject than we have been covering recently. Very interesting stuff. And the UK is probably a little bit like the US at the moment, because they're being instructed by the same people. And maybe your listeners don't know that. But if you've listened to the globalist mind virus, then you might know that basically a UK institute is leading the way in the coronavirus rollout, the computer modeling.
Would that be the Purbright Institute, or do you have another source?
No. It's another organization, and it's a college in London. And
Oxford?
No. We can get into that as we go along. You've caught me a bit by surprise, actually, because I thought we were going on at 9 and it's only 8.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I
Perhaps
thought
I
we
got the
started at
timing
9
wrong.
p.m. That's all right. I've still got my dinner in front of me, but I love spontaneity, so don't worry.
Okay. Well, if anybody can roll with the punches, I know it's you. So I'm grateful to have you on board anyway, despite the timing snafu. But we could come back to that. Yeah, certainly. You know, I want to say to the listeners out there that perhaps are hearing my voice, from Mark's voice, for the first time, that I do send out a couple, 3 emails at the most every month. That's generally the way I communicate. I try to get out and mix it up with the neighbors some here. But if you'd like to join my email list, feel free to send me an email and simply write the word subscribe in the subject line. That's good enough. That address is alarkintexas@gmail.com. So that's alarkintexas@gmail.com. And once again, a reminder, if you want to join us in the chat room, we have 4 people in there now. What really happened? .chatango.com. Anyway, I've asked Mark to join me for a second time. I think the last time we were together, Mark, was on the 10th of this month, of March, because you happen to be one of the most glib reporters on the scene that I know of. And because I'm not so glib, I feel it an honor that I can have someone like you accompany me doing these guest hosting spots, because my reputation with RVN listeners is that I'm rather a dull fellow, shall we say. And
Well,
that's
I've
because
never,
in Texas we don't talk fast down
very
here.
interesting. I've always found you very interesting, Lark. Don't underestimate yourself. Our
Well,
show when we first met up was fascinating.
that's right. We did one on communitarianism recently.
We
So
did.
yeah, you can find if you type in, ladies and gentlemen, Windows on the World in any search engine, you'll find Mark's main website, which is of course windowsontheworld.net, and then also on YouTube. So I just type in for myself Windows on the World, YouTube in my favorite search engine, and I find Mark's channel. And so yeah, those are very good. You want to tell the listeners real quick about your Sunday and your Wednesday live streams, Mark?
Yes, we go out live every Wednesday on YouTube, and it also goes out on the website. On Sunday, we do a radio show. So the Wednesday show is a video, which is live to YouTube. Basically, we use a streaming service. And on the Sunday, we do a radio show, which is live at windowsontheworld.net. And you just go to live shows. And then that gets put onto YouTube and other platforms after that. So while we're still on YouTube, yeah, all of our archive is there. We've done so much interesting stuff over the years. And the thing is with the shows that we put out is that they're very information packed. And the idea of it really was to provide some kind of archive. In other words, a through line of action to what's going on. So a lot of the shows are actually not kind of time-stamped in the respect that we cover the bigger picture of what's happening globally. So we sometimes do cover the bigger news stories, which may have a sort of local impact. But we talk sort of global to local, which is really what the globalist action plan is all about. I think that's the main issue that we talk about within communitarianism, but that goes into the United Nations Agenda 2030 policies, which are above national government, but they go into local government. So we cover these kind of things and also very esoteric things in some respects, because I like to know what's behind what's going on and the historical perspective as well.
Well, and I've noticed that. And of course, that's another thing I like about you, is because you bandy about that evasive, that elusive C word. Because as the listeners of RBN know, I have been trumpeting this word, communitarianism, communitarian law, sustainable development, Agenda 21, 2030, for, 10 years or more, just on this network alone. Because I want people to ask themselves, well, what the hell is this word? And what does this have to do with anything? How does it affect me? And so just on that note, let me share a recent quote I ran across from Nikki Rapana, which I thought is quite telling. And it's generally when she does a quote that is very clearly something she's worked on to perfect, I like to share it. She writes, communitarianism is the synthesis or the merging of all political and religious opposites under one giant community-controlled umbrella. This is the difficulty in finding a label for Trump, put your favorite politician or globalist in his stead, that makes sense. Globalist / Trump / politician embodies all the ideas submerged under communitarianism, including, but not limited to, fascism, corporate capitalism, and communism, and socialism. It's a continually evolving dictatorship of the community. Standing against communitarian religion, law, and policy is a stand against slavery, racism, eugenics, child porn, human trafficking, mandatory vaccines, land grabs, water grabs, and all the other ways and means that destroy human happiness. The big umbrella theory is the global emperor's new clothes. The dialectical pieces we know so well are the smokescreens hiding the naked aggression behind the communitarian veil. So there you have it. with malleability of language and instant connectivity today, we have a prescription for really disaster. On the one hand, we understand that technologies or tools such as language, such as personal computers and smart devices, etc., can be used for good. They can also be wielded for ill. And that's one thing that I try to keep in mind at all times, because a lot of times what we know as the global village or the global public square via the internet is not reality at all. Any thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, this is it. And most people don't understand how governance really works. In actual fact, governance is much more fragmented and unstructured than people realize. But that's a kind of surface issue as well, because it's highly organized, but it's not within the structures that people think it is.
Yeah, notice, ladies and gentlemen, Mark used the word governance. Governance is a synonym for management, because the reality today is what we're witnessing is that nation states are going by the wayside. In their stead, what is being erected is a so-called market security state. It's a globalized market security state. And we also, at the same time, are seeing the rise of the so-called regionalized city-state. So these are important things to bear in mind. Governance is the new watchword, replacing government, because nation states are going away. They're being rendered obsolete, irrelevant. We have a global infrastructure being erected in their place. That's why this idea of national identities and borders is under attack that we're seeing all over. And this thing called the market security state has everything to do with a community of communities within an environment on environments, and so forth and so on. The language that is being wielded today somehow doesn't make sense for most of us. And there's a reason for that, because they've adopted their own language. And it's marked by things like obscurantism. You can liken it to newspeak or crime stop, newspeak, or doublethink, Orwellian language. And I think that's safe to say. So we have to simply become facile enough in the grasp of the language they're using to realize that a lot of times we're just being played. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, and I think there's a huge misunderstanding about the language that is used. So we get these phrases that are implanted, like vibrant, diversity, and they're all communitarian words, and we've discussed that. But it goes into the creation of an unreality. In other words, the societal construct that people are living in is, on one level, on a superficial level, it's there for the common good, which means that it's there for the public to see and believe that that society functions in a certain way, but it doesn't function in that way at all. It functions in a much different way. And this is, I think, the big problem when you try and explain things to people, because they go back into the words that they've been programmed into. They'll use the words that they've been given in response to what you've said. They'll say it's a conspiracy theory because they've been told to say that, because they've been implanted with ideas which will shut down anything outside the controlled narrative. And this is really what 1984 was about. It's really kind of Brave New World crossed with 1984. And Brave New World is a kind of totalitarian idea, but it's rolled out in a very kind of fluffy, nice way. But there's an iron fist.
That's right. Tyranny with the smiley face. Let's take this break, ladies and gentlemen, Mark, and we'll rejoin after these messages. You know, I think before the break, I think we were describing a form of psychological and or mimetic warfare. Would you agree with that, Mark?
That's absolutely what it is. Yeah.
You know, I like to just on the last time that we were together, I shared with the listeners something I titled called Two Overarching Communitarian Policy Objectives. 1, depopulation, and 2, techno-slavery. So techno-slavery and depopulation and techno-slavery, it all fits together because this is part and parcel, and this is integral to global to local communitarian governance. We're seeing it every day. It's being rolled out every day in different guises and permutations across the mediascape, within our daily lives. We're seeing it. But depopulation, as a reminder, is a standalone euphemism for total war. So it might mean one thing to you and I, depopulation, and it's true what depopulation means, but it also means total war, because the objective is a totalitarian system of governance. So it's in order to effect a soft kill or a genocide of the human population. And I urge you to learn what is genocide, and go to genocidewatch.com, for example, so you can understand what are the 10 stages of genocide. Because it's more than just mass murdering people, for instance. So examples of depopulation include psychological, asymmetric, nonlinear, cybernetic, biological, cultural, spiritual, socioeconomic, memetic engineering, also known as warfare, even chemical warfare, lawfare, and more. So it is an all-encompassing program. And I like to add that these so-called GRIN technologies, an acronym standing for genetics, robotics, information, and nanotech, figure prominently, because I think these people are deadly serious. They want total war. They're having total war, they're waging total war, but not the type of warfare that most of us associate that word war with. It's not only about guns ablazing, tanks are rolling down the roads, and bombs going off. When we talk about techno-slavery, what we're speaking to is AI, the world of big data, the information age, the Internet of Things. Remember, the new global public square, the new global village. It's no longer in the time of social distancing, the corner drugstore or the malt shop or downtown. Remember, technologies are simply tools, and these are man-made contrivances like language itself. Any and all utilitarian or utile, useful devices, instruments, toys, like money, and smart everything. So in order for this system to work, it requires your input, your biological input. Because what is that word smart? It means a lot of different things. It's an acronym, yes, but it's the self-monitoring of analysis and reporting technology. And that means that first, the buy-in is engineered, and you now, the slave, can implement the vision. So we ask ourselves, well, who are these communitarians? What is a communitarian? Those kind of questions are answered for you. You can start going to the republicbroadcasting.org website, where you see columnists on the left side. Click on columnist archives, or simply go into any search engine and type in communitarianism first things first. Then type in Lark on communitarianism. In 2 papers and no more than a 15-minute read, you get a broad brush overview of what you're dealing with in this world today. So anyway, we'll pick up on that score, on that note, after these messages. Before the break, I was describing to y'all techno-slavery, and I made mention once again that the overarching agenda of the globalist, if you will, the communitarian plan for global to local governance, management, their imposition into your lives, was twofold. Number one, depopulation, and two, techno-slavery. And I suggested that you all do some searches. Communitarianism, first things first. What the heck is a communitarian? How do we identify them? Who or what is the enemy? And remember what Sun Tzu said in The Art of War. If you don't know your enemy, and yet you claim to know yourself, it's like fighting with one hand tied behind your back. You can expect to lose half your battles. You have to know your enemy and yourself if you're to prevail in all of your battles. And we're talking about life itself. With communitarianism and this techno-slavery that I speak of, we're talking about institutionalized slavery devolving to a social contract which fosters and promotes a relationship. Remember, a contract is a relationship. A relationship is a contract in which the human population unwittingly volunteers itself into perpetual servitude to the community. Hence, techno-slavery is totalitarian rule by enlightened scientists, priests of the mind, and oh yes, all those other voices that are not yours, outside of your head. You know, those self-serving, self-styled experts. So always remember that communitarianism calls for a scientific dictatorship of the community. And what Mark and I were speaking to earlier about this communitarian code speak, as I term it, these new buzzwords that are all about us, of recent social distancing. We can liken mimetic warfare. You can do a search, mimetic warfare, the future of war, on the internet. Callie Lassen, who is an ad executive in Canada, Adbusters, wrote a book called Culture Jam. He says this: potent memes can change minds, alter behavior, catalyze collective mind shifts, and transform cultures, which is why meme warfare has become the geopolitical battle of our information age. Whoever has the memes has the power. And I think that's a very telling quote. Again, when we're listening to the beat of others drumming, controlling our thoughts, our activities, our actions, our behaviors, our attitudes, our beliefs, etc., this is a sign that we are being acculturated by outside agencies other than ourselves. We're allowing other people to control our lives. You know, man is a famous mimicker or an aper. We learn by rote. Class, repeat after me. Remember? But that is the mark of an aper, a mimicker. You know, we have a whole new science today called biomimicry, which is very interesting on that score. But beyond being an aper, man is also a oneer, and that includes you. You are unique and one of a kind in all of creation. There will never be another you. There never was another you. There's not another you. And so we must remember that. We are at once apers and oneers. And a oneer is a winner. So there you have it, a little context. Thoughts, Mark?
Well, yeah. Agreed. I mean, I think that identifying what this is about is very important to people because it's not clear within the public generally what we're talking about. People don't understand the word communitarianism, but when it's applied to other concepts, in other words, when you're describing what's happening within society, then it actually starts to make sense to them. So once you start looking at this coded language, and yes,
We got you back, Mark.
all this new stuff, self-isolation, self-distancing, this is all part of it. These memes that get put in to the public.
Yeah, I think so. I try to remind people that there's a very helpful guide that y'all can search on the internet. Just do a search. Just do a search within your favorite search engine. Do a keyword search. The Definitive Anti-Communitarian Manifesto. The Definitive Anti-Communitarian Manifesto. This is something you can read. If you look into the appendices section, you're going to see something called communitarian buzzwords. And these are going to be words that you're familiar with because you hear them bandied about all the time. But also within the appendices, towards the end of the book, some 360-something pages, you're going to see something entitled Big Mother's Double-Tongued Dictionary. So this is something that is alphabetized. And it was revised from the 2003 edition in 2012. So it might be dated in some respects, but you still are going to see a lot of these same buzzwords and terms of art, phrases, coded words within coded language, alphabetized, more than 200 entries. And then you're going to begin to see it. I mean, ask yourself how many times you're hearing or reading just the word community alone that we didn't 25, 30 years ago. And of course, remember, this ties into sustainable development. Remember, sustainable development was born out of a document published in 1987 called Our Common Future. This is what codified the language of sustainable development. But remember, if you go to communitarianism, first things first, doing a search, you're going to learn about the contributions since the late 60s and the early 70s to this so-called language of sustainable development, now codified and agreed upon at the Rio Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. And then, of course, they had what was called Rio Plus 20. It's all coming together. But remember, they have to work from a playbook. If you're going to have a master business plan for the whole world, you have to have what's called collaborative governance, and something which affords the most efficient maximum interoperability. In other words, you have to be speaking the same language. And see, you and I are not necessarily hip to this language. That's why it behooves us to get hip to this language so that we can understand how it is that we are being socially engineered and thereby enslaved. Because that's the reality of the situation. When we're talking about communitarian governance, you're talking, again, total war. And you're talking about a form of totalitarianism. You can call it socialism, you can call it fascism, you can call it communism, however you like. But communitarianism is really just a rebranding of capitalism and communism, because under communitarian system, it's not fully capitalist, it's not fully communist, and that's, again, how we get all the populace to fight amongst each other. You know, we are fighting amongst each other over pieces of language and interpretation of meaning, et cetera, et cetera. And so we can't ever come together as a people because people have a different worldview. And we understand that. I personally welcome that idea. However, I'm of a mind that I don't like my way of life being superimposed upon or trod upon by somebody else's idea of what utopia is, for instance. And I'm sure you would agree with that, Mark.
Well, that's exactly right, Lark. It's interesting you mentioned the UN Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 policies. Maybe your listeners are quite well versed in this, but if they're not, yes, it came out of the Rio conference in 1992. But before that, yeah, we had Our Common Future. And that is a defining document in communitarianism, because that really told us the bigger picture of how this new governance was going to be rolled out. And it was going to be rolled out through unstructured global governance and through NGOs, and basically a huge education system or re-education system for the public. Basically, it was about getting everyone on board with the idea of sustainable development. In other words, you demonize everything outside the accepted corridor of opinion. And the way that's done is actually quite clever. And that's where this communitarian idea really comes in, because it's a totalitarian way of dealing with people. In other words, the UN will say things like, nobody will be left behind, which means there's no choice. You're going to give up all your rights to save the planet. Well, that's what we're going to tell you you're doing. That's actually not what it's about. It's a business plan for the world. And that business plan for the world has been very apparent over the past couple of weeks. I mean, in this country, in the UK, and I've been watching President Trump's address to the press today, which I always find amusing, his dismissive attitude to those prostitutes, those awful people who are all communitarians in the audience. And he does his best to be dismissive on that level. It was very interesting watching what he said and the way he's trying to play things down. But in this country, we're actually under martial law. The supermarkets are pretty empty. The shelves in places are empty. There's a look in the eyes of the public that they're in a bit of shock now, because they've collected as many toilet rolls as they need for the next 6 weeks, and they've raided every supermarket they can. And now they're wondering what it's really all about, because it certainly isn't about a flu virus.
Well, that's exactly right. There is a much bigger agenda afoot than just this. I always say that, frankly, the world of banking and finance, the economic systems that are integrated around the world, the global trading system, the system of distribution of goods and services, and even ideas. This is all part of one system, which ties together, frankly, banking and the law. And that's why I urge people to look up, do a search. Is Google your friend? Perhaps in this case, it might be. What is communitarian law? I mean, at least become aware that there is a system of international law which is being superimposed over and upon all nationalist laws. And that's what's happening. We see it. But it's all rolled together. And really, I kind of think what they're doing is they're preparing us for things like a global digital currency, working through the blockchain and cryptocurrencies, if you will. Perhaps pegged to gold. I don't know. But we know that they've had to reset the global economy, and particularly since, right here in the States, for instance, this economy has been propped up since the bank collapses, the bank failures in 2008. And I'm certainly no expert about anything relative to finance because, of course, I'm trying to live my life poorer. I've redefined wealth, on my terms. Really for the first time in my life. And I suggest that other people consider doing the same thing. Ask yourself, what is wealth? What is well-being? What is wellness? What is health? I mean, you have nothing unless you have good health. And, frankly, I don't like to see the panic that we see across the globe today. Even in my own neck of the woods, Mark, I'm seeing the same thing you're seeing. The schools are closed. The grocery stores are cutting their hours. They're starting to ration. And all of this thing has been cooked up basically to put the fear of the new God in people's heads. And that new God is not the God that many of us know and understand is the God that's tied to nature and the planets and things that are based in reality. This is a man-made contrivance, 100%. We'll take this break, Mark, and remember, 800-313-9443. Y'all can call in. We'll be back. So we're back with this last segment of the first hour. This is a short segment, Mark, and we'll have a break for the top of the hour, and then we'll be back. I want to remind y'all, Mark Windows, windowsontheworld.net, Windows on the World on YouTube, the globalist mind virus. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I think I sounded pretty close, Lark, yeah.
But yeah, that was fantastic. And I'm glad that I had a chance to watch that just before we went on air because, a lot of us are using different language to describe the same things. And, we're all articulate in our own ways. And it's just useful that I can pick up on language from someone like yourself who has been researching these kinds of issues for some time. And that's why I think it's great that we're joining forces, if you will, from across the pond. And, we're bringing European listeners and American listeners and Canadian listeners and listeners from all over the world, onto one stage. So I think this all works to our advantage. I've also described these words called the 3 A's that I term the 3 A's. And they stand for the words amnesia, abulia, and apathy. This is what's happening to us if we're not mindful of what's happening to us. With amnesia, the collective memory dies. What is it like to be free and independent, to have liberty? Abulia is the conditioned loss of will. That's spelled A-B-U-L-I-A or A-B-O-U-L-I-A. The conditioned loss of will. What do you want me to do about it? I can't do anything about it. And apathy signifies our lack of concern or care. Remember the 3 A's, amnesia, abulia, and apathy. Remember, this is part of our social conditioning. This is our engineered destiny, our common future, if you will. They have to breed this in us. Amnesia, abulia, and apathy. Yet all 3 of these A words lead to our subjugation, our suicide, and our acculturation. Inter alia, these 3 things will lead us to an eventual state of anomie, spelled A-N-O-M-I-E. And then finally into a state of learned helplessness. And this is when we know that we've been made slaves, ladies and gentlemen. And this is what we don't want to see happen. Stay with us. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Welcome to hour 2 of What Really Happened. This is Lark in Texas, standing in for Mike Rivero. Mike will be back on Monday, y'all. So we'll be looking forward to that. And I can't say who's going to be filling in for Mike tomorrow at this moment, but perhaps I'll know in a bit. In any event, I wanted to say that, remind you once again, if you wanted to get on my email list, you're welcome to send me an email, alarkintexas@gmail.com, alarkintexas@gmail.com, and just simply write the word subscribe. I send out 2 or 3 email blasts a month at the most, and that way I can share information with y'all. You can personally communicate with me directly. Remember, you can find my writings on RBN itself, republicbroadcasting.org, or simply just do a search, Communitarianism, First Things First, Lark on Communitarianism. Also at RBN, under columnist, archives, scroll back, couple days, 3 days, 4 pages ago. Weaponizing the language closes the doors of human perception. And I want to remind you once again, do a search, the Definitive Anti-Communitarian Manifesto. Read the book. We've got the time. A lot of you are staying home from work. You're not going to school. It's spring break, something. But remember, though, that there's always there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And really all we need to do is become aware of what it is that we have to navigate. We have to be aware of this cultural, economic, socio-political milieu in which we all must navigate through this thing called life. And that's the purpose of programming like you hear at RBN. But anyway, I thought I would, I do this to Vicki Davis quite a bit, y'all. I spring things on her and force her into situations she doesn't always want to be part of. But during the break, I took the liberty of asking Mike, the board op, to see if he could bring up Vicki. And at some point, I think I've already introduced you to Mark, but did I formally introduce you to Mark Windows, Vicki?
No, you didn't.
Well, let me do that. Mark Windows, he has a website called windowsontheworld.net. He has a YouTube channel called Windows on the World. And he does a radio broadcast every Sunday. I believe that's 9 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. And then every Wednesday, he does a live stream on YouTube at 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. And he's quite the researcher, just like you, Vicki. And so I'm glad that I could introduce the two of you. So say hello to each other.
Hi, Vicki.
Yeah. Hi. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I'll go take a look at your website because.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and Mark is in an undisclosed location somewhere in England. Yeah. And I know he's away from London these days, but so our connection is a little bit wanky here, Vicki, but we'll get past it. But I'm glad that you guys should know of each other because both of you are researchers that I personally respect. And, I follow your work. And, of course, y'all, Vicki's website is thetechnocratictyranny.com and also channelingreality.com. And I think, too, don't you do a radio show once a week, Vicki?
Yeah, I do. I do Govern America with Darren Weeks, and that's on Saturday mornings at 9 begins at 9 a.m. Mountain Time.
Yeah, and I think that is about 10 o'clock Central Time or my time. And
yes,
it's a 3-hour broadcast, and it's quite good. I haven't missed a single one since you guys got back from your hiatus, I think. But yeah, that's quite worthwhile, Mark, to check out Vicki's work too. That's every Saturday, but you'll find that information. Yeah, governamerica.com. That's the address. And also, listeners, I want to remind you that we do have a bit of a chat room. We've got 9 people in there now. That would be whatreallyhappened.chatango.com. Whatreallyhappened.chatango.com. Feel free to pop in, visit. It's a pretty friendly chat room. People share links, expand on the topics at hand, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, Vicki, because I'm always interested in what's on your mind. What is on your mind, Vicki?
Well, you can't avoid this whole pandemic. I think the response is out of line with what they originally described.
Well, it has all the earmarks of something planned quite well, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, and there are 2 things that I've noticed. They are rolling out telehealth, which is a system that's been in the planning and the works for a long time. So it looks like they are doing like the final conversion of our healthcare system to the design that they've been rolling out for like the last 3 decades. And the other part of it, the laboratory testing, that's one thing. I'll have to look at or think about what the other one was. I was kind of prepared. Thank you, Lark. But that's okay.
Well, speaking of telehealth, I have to tell you that when I used to have a catering company here in Dallas, back around early to mid '90s, I believe, I had a client who's a neurosurgeon. I catered their wedding reception, and I mean, this is a world-class neurosurgeon, but he was doing telehealth, as you describe it, or telemedicine back in the 90s. In other words, he was literally supervising a team of surgeons in different parts of the world as in real time as they were performing a brain surgery operation.
Yes.
So that's just a harbinger of things to come when we talk about telehealth. I think I think what they're going to do with the education system is going to be all working along a similar path. Betsy DeVos, big champion of charter schools and the like. You have to ask yourself, what will be the shape of public education in years to come, especially if everybody's connected and wired.
They're dismantling it. These are big systems designs, and I remembered what the other part of it was, and that's medicine by chemistry, by body chemistry, using decision support systems, and personalized medicine too. So that's really totally experimental, and will always be experimental, because if you're compounding drugs for one person, it's experimental by definition, right?
Yes, I think Mark, you were referencing something about computer modeling in terms of how they're basing their agenda.
This is the most astonishing thing about it, is that this whole kind of theater around this so-called pandemic, which it actually isn't by definition, is being rolled out by Imperial College in London on the back of a computer model. So President Trump and Boris Johnson in the UK are basically reading from a pre-prepared script on the back of a computer model. So this is kind of dystopian within itself. And what's actually happening in this country is that the population are being absolutely brainwashed into emptying supermarket shelves. And the next thing is, I think we're going to see the beginnings of very staged civil unrest, which is going to be quashed very quickly, as they've got 20,000 army troops who are going to be helping, but they're really medical aid. But what we've got within a week in the UK is basically martial law. And I've had people phoning me up today and talking about very seriously, the collapse of the whole financial system. These are people who actually do know something about it. So it's quite incredible the way things have escalated.
Yeah, I think so too. I've been hearing a little bit about that. Some people are saying that this is the global financial reset. And the way that they're rolling out this pandemic thing, it really is quite genius, because they've terrorized everybody into staying in their homes, not touching anybody else. And if they happen to go round up people, who's to say anything about it? Because it's medical martial law.
Well, this is the main problem. Yeah, absolutely, because the police now have powers to detain people. But the thing is that the police are not medically qualified. They can't make a diagnosis. So in other words, it's wide open to abuse. And at the moment, I'm in one of the most corrupt boroughs in the United Kingdom as far as the police go. And I've actually had to interact with the police force here and also higher up because they were absolutely abusing their powers. I mean, to an extent that they were creating crime and then no criming, at least 24,000 crimes a year. So to say this is open to abuse is an understatement, because what they've actually effectively done is given unqualified people access to powers that they just should not have.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all of this is towards the to the takeover of global governance. So it's not just your government, it's not just your local police department, it is all of the governments across all of the Western world. And I don't know enough about the other foreign governments, you know, like the Soviet, like Russia and Poland and those countries, or the island nations of the Asia Pacific. I don't know about those, but for the Western countries, this is all part of the what I believe is the takeover for global governance. And I think it was absolutely brilliant to use a pandemic to begin this process.
Yes, that's absolutely right. But what's amazing to me about it is how banal the whole thing is. But we're talking here about seasonal flu. Despite the hype, this is flu. So people aren't actually dying of this virus. They're dying of underlying health conditions, and they're dying from things like pneumonia. So basically, if you look at the World Health Organization website, who are now working with the World Economic Forum on actually financing this vaccine. So they're working on financing a vaccine. They want 2 billion to basically get the vaccine rolling, and then they want 10 billion to roll it out. And they're asking private investors to get involved. And this is basically a business plan. And the whole thing has been structured across a time scale which cannot possibly exist if this is seasonal flu. Because as we know in China, it's already pretty much died out. And even though there's a lot of possible misinformation coming out there, sort of decoding the whole thing is not that difficult, because they're now saying in this computer program from Imperial College London that they're expecting 80% of the population to be infected. Well, that simply can't happen. That just can't happen with flu. So this is based on the sort of flawed modeling of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You tell us all this stuff about climate change, and in other words, it's there to predict a predetermined outcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's bring up Dan in Washington, y'all. Let's hear what Dan has to say. How you doing there, Dan?
Hey, good. Thanks for taking the call. Enjoyed your show. Thanks for filling in. And I guess I mean, I do think there is going to be a population, you know, especially in Africa, and I wouldn't mind if they would just be honest and say, hey, you know, actually the Chinese way is the better way. If they would say, hey, you could have one kid, or hey, we'll have financial incentives to reduce population. But I just, my whole life, you know, when you look at, say, Gloria Steinem, the radical feminism, you know, the stuff I grew up with in the 90s, where it'd be a huge controversy, you know, should you open a door for a woman? And I mean, they did all this kind of stuff to destroy the family and divide men and women. And what gets me is just it's all based on lies. You know, they don't just come out and tell you or even ask you in a way where we could all work together. You know, if we want to save all the animals, the rhinoceros and the giraffe and stuff, but it's just all based on lies and manipulation. Would you agree? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I would. I don't think they don't want anybody to organize to go up against the agenda. So all of the social movements of this, I would say 60s, 70s, and 80s, all of that has been for the purpose of cultural cannibalization. And in addition to that, from the 1990s forward, they've been working on de-ideologicalization of people. You know, you're a global citizen now. You're not a citizen of the United States.
That's right. Hold on to that thought, Vicky. Dan, stay on the line. Mark,
Okay, thanks.
take this break, and we'll be back in just a moment. What really happened on RBN? On the lines with us today, we've got Mark Windows, we got Miss Vicky Davis, and we have Dan in Washington. But we can also include you. That number is 800-313-9443. Remember, this is talk radio, y'all. You're welcome to call in. Your thoughts are welcome. Back to you, Dan.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's just it seems like it's being used against the European people and white people because they've scared a lot of, you know, my generation are not having kids. We're poor. They're in college debt. You know, they fill you full of the girls, full of, you know, the feminist stuff and the environmental stuff, and they go into debt and go to college. And by the time they figure anything out, they're 35, and they're not going to have kids. So, okay, if they're doing that to reduce population, but then they turn around and say, hey, we need immigrants, and just import masses of people. So it seems like they're not focusing on, say, Africa or places where, even India, I mean, where you could legitimately say, hey, there is a population crisis here that, so I guess that was my main point. And then to change the question real quick, sorry for changing it, but is communitarianism, is that basically the New World Order, but you're talking more about the like the legal language they use as far as communitarian law, similar to the New World Order.
It just happens to be the most descriptive word, the single best word to describe what we're talking about. It's really, you can liken it to tyranny with a smiley face, if you will. But
right.
I've urged people to look into the word. You know, you can go online and simply type in what is communitarianism, what is communitarian law, what is a communitarian. You can type in communitarianism first things first. You can go on YouTube and simply type in the word communitarian, and then really who you have to satisfy is you yourself, whether or not this is a useful word to be aware of, a word which describes the world in which we are part of today.
You know what, Lark, you just triggered something. Communitarian law is not really attached to a nation state. And in order to understand the New World Order, you have to just erase the concept of nation state from your mind and think about a new organization of the world that is by regions, and the the elimination of the citizen is associated with the nation state, and military is associated with the nation state, but they've been converting the military to be more of a what would you call it, a humanitarian force, a police action. And all of the militaries in the world have been working together. They've been getting the militaries to work together. All of this is in preparation for a global governing system. And so communitarianism fits right into that, doesn't it, Lark?
It does. And, early on, I've equated communitarianism to really a new system of neocolonialism or neo-feudalism. And I always like to remind people that communitarianism is said to be the final solution because it's been deemed so perfect that it need not give rise to any further conflict or debate. That's because they can shape the language within any debate or conflict and always have it collapse towards the oneness of the communitarian agenda. And the oneness of language is important to be hip to, I would say. We need to remember that the language itself is a technology, and techno-slavery is what they have in mind, that along with depopulation. So when you have a malleability of language, that means that you can more easily affect policy. It's just as if you were in a panopticon or a prison, a global prison, in a sense.
Ultimately, though, it is the wealthy running all of it, and everybody else is a slave.
That's right. Hold on. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us if you want, Dan. Bear in mind, banking and law, it works as one. When you have a system of martial rule and now martial law, we're talking about the doctrine of necessity under international law. International law does exist. At the International Court of Justice at The Hague, ask yourself, what kind of law is practiced there? That would be communitarian law. What's the new law of the European Union? It's acquis communautaire in the French. It's communitarian law in the English. The English people, the English-speaking people of the world, what do they hear? What do they read? Community law. What the heck is that? You know, and so the evidence is out there. I've asked people to do a search. What is reflexive law? Well, this is how the attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, worldviews are defined. This is how they change you to become a communitarian, whether you realize it or not. You know, they feel like they've already orchestrated and engineered the buy-in, the acceptance. And now it's up to you, the communitarian slaves, to implement the vision. Because if you have a system of organized crime that's worldwide, my goodness, you need a lot of partners in crime if you intend to take over the whole world. But anyway, back to you, Mark, and then back to you, Dan. Go.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you've got some great listeners, and I'd agree with all the points that were being made very, very concisely by your callers there. Absolutely great points, and it really nails the whole system that we're in. But we're talking really about a management system, a global local management system of people, property, land, all resources, energy, belief, and reality. And it's so important for the reality to be controlled. And this is the whole point of, I think, what we're talking about, in that people talk about these terms. They say things like the common good, the public interest. They don't understand what they mean. The common good doesn't mean it's good for you. It means it's good in the eyes of the public through the media. That's what the common good is. When a judge says something's not in the public interest, it means that it's not in the public's interest for them to know about it, because if they know about it, it's going to destabilize society. They're going to stop believing what's on television, and they're going to start thinking, and that's not for the common good. And the whole idea of world government is that it's when people say, oh, there's a new world order, and they say it's a conspiracy theory. But you see, the term world government is a misdirection, and it's for those who know a little about the governance system. So they'll say world governance. And for those who don't, it's a conspiracy theory, you know. But the public are always placed between these two lies, two parties or two opposing views. All political parties are just one solid mechanism. And this is something that's incredibly difficult to get over to people, because they have been brainwashed into a system which has now gone into this communitarian system, and language has been reframed, behavior has been reframed, behavioral change. We heard that from Boris Johnson. He said we're going to have to see significant behavioral change in the public over this so-called pandemic. And these words are being used by all politicians and all people in public office. So I think it's really important that people understand this. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, I totally agree with everything that you just said there. The thing is, people could what I've been trying to do, for quite a number of years is to put together the puzzle of how we got here. What were the steps that it took to get us here? Because I was born into a country, the United States of America, and over my lifetime, it has been eroded. The nation state has been eroded. And our local governments have been basically bought off through economic development money. The whole global system has been built on economic development, which started with the Marshall Plan after World War II. And if you follow that thread, then you have to see it. You have to see it because it evolves into the Economic Development Administration in 1965 in our country. They called it the Great Society here in the United States, and I think they called it the Good Society in Great Britain, didn't they?
Yes, well, it's interesting what you say about the Marshall Plan, because the second Marshall Plan was in 1992. It was announced as the second Marshall Plan, and that was at the Rio Earth Summit. And of course, a lot of what we're dealing with today is the result of what happened there and this environmental movement, which was completely communitarian. And yes, it's absolutely what I talk about all the time. And looking at your website, it's fascinating because you nail all the points that we talk about, and you've also got your own insights. So that's why I think it's fascinating that people sort of bring this information together, because everyone's got bits of the jigsaw, and it's making it simple for people to understand, because a lot of the terminology they are not used to hearing. But yeah, I agree with your point there that we are basically the way that the system's been taken over, the public don't see that, so it's a huge problem. But the development, the taking over of the local governance level is something that I've been looking into for a long time. In fact, that was what actually woke me up to the way the whole system was being implemented. So if you look at what's happening locally, you will see what's happening globally.
Yes, that's exactly right.
I just used to drive up to Canada a lot, and they've ruined that whole country because the growth management there, all their housing complexes, they build 3,000 houses that all look the same, 5 feet from each other, and then everything else is kind of off limits. And there's a lot of that in the Seattle area as well. So
that's all Agenda 21.
Yeah.
Yeah, always remember that in this system that really what you are is a commercial instrument. You are inventory.
In some of the less developed countries, but certainly, yeah, the whole of Britain has been absolutely re-engineered. London was engineered within 3 years with these developments, this hive housing, and it's going up with no public consultation.
Yeah,
my mom's actually tried to
be.
She's tried to get active in the Seattle area, but it's already a done deal. They'll have a public meeting on if they'll allow, because she's saying they're not building the roads to accommodate all the growth, and then she'll go to a public meeting, but it's already a done deal by the time they have the meeting, and they can't do anything. So
yeah,
anyway,
those
I'm enjoying the show. I'll get off.
All right, thanks for calling in, Dan.
Thanks.
Anyway, y'all, let's bring up Glenn in Philly. Glenn in Philadelphia. How are you, Glenn?
All right, Lark. Hello. Hello, Mark Windows, and someone else is there too, I believe.
Vicki Davis.
Hello. Much of what's going on here is very much analogous to the American situation of government, the question of centralization versus decentralization and the separation of powers. If we look back to the Civil War, the American struggle to maintain state rights in decentralization versus an increasingly powerful federal government, which is centralization. We have the same thing going on now at the international level. So the nation-state rights are analogous to states' rights in the U.S., and then the centralization of global authority and power is the centralization problem. We have, if you think about it in terms of executive, legislative, and judicial, we see the UN becoming the de facto global legislative body, the International Court becoming as the judicial aspect of things, and we're still kind of waiting for the evolution of the global executive branch. And as a Christian, I'm saying, well, your global president is going to be your global executive, the Antichrist, when he comes on the scene. So,
Yeah,
well,
I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I'm not sure they're going to do that. They like to keep the facade of a national government. And maybe at some point, but I think they'll keep the facade.
Well, as a dispensationalist Christian who believes in a literal return of Christ and the fulfillment of prophecy, I'm one of many millions of people, who are waiting for the return of Christ and watching for the advent of the Antichrist and the false prophet. We're going to see some sort of a global religious body. We see the Pope and the interfaith and the ecumenical movement type thing going around saying that the protest is over and they want to bring everybody under the auspices of the Catholic Church or something, or some sort of thing. Evolution will occur there in terms of a global religious body. Economically, we have the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of all the central banks. So all of this centralization into a global form is in process, I would suggest.
The late Harold Berman, law professor for 60 years, taught American law students, a noted Soviet legal expert, by the way. He said that there was really no separation between religion, philosophy, law, and economics. And I think that's true. Kenneth Boulding, Boulding, Kenneth Boulding, look him up, y'all. He said this: a world of unseen dictatorship is conceivable, still using the forms of democratic government. That's what we're seeing.
And right. And the great analogy is the separation of powers in executive, legislative, and judicial. This is worldwide. We saw it even in the Soviet Union. You had, the Duma and, the legislative body, offices, the judicial offices, and the executive offices. So
yeah, but we also have an administrative branch too, and when you have this kind of when you have this kind of takeover, whether within a nation state or around the world, you're seeing the rise of this bureaucratic class, what is called the nomenclatura. And that's because the people at the top want a firewall between themselves and the now dispossessed bourgeoisie or middle class as they join the ranks of the classless and the wage slaves known as the proletariats.
Right, and this is what makes it. And so the overt, what they maintain for our consumption is the overt notion of the separation of powers into executive, legislative, and judicial. But the administrative is still to this day a matter of a semi-concealed sleight of hand thing in which you have a class of tyrannical oligarchs. The oligarchy is a governing of the few. Oligarchs is few or little. So this class of the betters and the administrative state. I mean, we're not even supposed to have administrative courts here in the United States, but we certainly do. So yeah.
Well, remember this. We no longer really have public offices. No longer do we have public lands. All these so-called agencies of government, formerly known as, have all been privatized.
That was the regionalization, the creation of a common market. That's what the La Paz Treaty was about. And then when they signed the WTO, it basically that was the globalization of our economy.
Right.
And so the beginning of
Right, exactly. And this lays bare the fact that it is indeed a tyrannical oligarchy. The power of the pen is mightier than the sword. And they pen themselves a bunch of laws to create the administrative state. And so then you have these bodies, which are, these bodies with authority and power, which are, immune to being addressed by the normal channels of, legislative, executive, and judicial. So
that's very true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you mentioned the UN. If you look in the UN Charter of 1947, they are above all international law. They cannot be prosecuted, but can actually prosecute other people. They can move gold, currency, assets, or funds freely between countries, and they are diplomatically immune in every country they are in. So that's a clue when you see what's happening with the UN. But you're talking about law, that's really interesting too, because administrative courts are actually unlawful under the laws of England. That's in Halsbury's laws. Yet administrative courts are running many parts of local government because local government uses administrative courts. And the county court in Britain uses obviously Admiralty law. The Admiralty law goes back to about 1200. And we keep getting judges who are telling us that we're in the wrong jurisdiction. We have to get things onto Queen's Bench because in this administrative system, anything can be stolen and the paperwork is fraudulent and the implementation of it is unlawful, yet they say it's legal. Just wanted to make that point.
Right. All right. And well, in the UK, here in the US, we have, for example, the Federal Reserve. And, in the UK, you have the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Bank of England, the City of London. You have crown corporations in the UK. We have public-private partnerships in the US. It's all the same.
Yeah, but we're seeing more of that here. In actual fact, this is a kind of global rollout where NGOs and basically organizations which are unaccountable are running everything. For instance, in the UK, we've got Serco running massive parts of the public sector. And we've also got G4S. Now, G4S actually issue their own paperwork, their own court. It's incredible.
Hold on there, Mark. And callers, we'll be taking a quick break. We'll be back in about 2-3 minutes. I think you had some thoughts there, Vicki, that you wanted to express before we go into the break and before we bring up our next caller.
Yes. The caller. Shoot, hang on a sec. Oh.
The more music, the better. That's okay.
The caller brought a thought to my mind that I can't tell you what he said, but on the RAND website, RAND Corporation.
Yes.
There is an article called "The Case of the Soviet Union: The Dictator's Dilemma," and they were talking about George Shultz and his negotiating with the Soviet Union during the 1980s, and trying to reach some kind of an accommodation so that the Soviet Union would open up to the West, open up their economy. And the author summed up the dilemma this way. He said, the dictator, speaking of the Soviet Union, the dictator may be stuck with a stark choice between securing the rewards of either the invisible hand or the iron fist, market success or social control. And what they've done with this global system with technology, with the technology systems, the solution to the dictator's dilemma is, of course, the invisible fist. And that's the kind of system that they're building. The systems of the panopticon are the invisible fist.
Yeah, just as Kenneth Boulding was describing in a more simplistic way. You have some final thoughts there, Glenn?
In Russia, the fist may not be so invisible that much longer because they're working to change the role of the president in 2024. So Putin, when his presidential term is up, could find himself as the new czar of Russia.
But that's exactly what they're doing with our country. That's exactly what Donald Trump is right now.
Okay, hold on, y'all. We've got a top of the hour break. Pat, Fort Worth, you hang on there too. And we'll return in 2 minutes flat. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lark in Texas, filling in for Michael today. Just a reminder, Michael will be back in the saddle, I believe, on Monday is the word. And I want to remind you, too, that you, too, can call in. The number is 800-313-9443. You can join us in the chat room. whatreallyhappened.chatango.com. And we've got 9 people in there. We've dropped a few interesting links and the like, and I think that that would benefit y'all that are listening today to at least pop in and see what you can learn, see what you can glean. Another reminder, if you want to get on my email list, just send me an email. Just write subscribe in the subject line, alarkintexas@gmail.com. alarkintexas@gmail.com. Don't forget to visit Mark Windows' website. That would be windowsontheworld.net. Also on YouTube, he has a channel by the same name, Windows on the World on YouTube. And learn about his Sunday talk radio show or his podcast, and also his live stream that he does every Wednesday. And I think you'd be well served to visit that website and learn about Mark Windows. Also remember Vicki Davis's website, thetechnocratictyranny.com, and also channelingreality.com. She does a radio show every Saturday, governamerica.com. So anyway, we do have a caller. Did one of y'all have something to say before we bring on our caller?
One last thing, if I may, Lark, before I go.
Sure.
Let's not forget the specialized roles of the 3 set-apart cities throughout the world. In Rome, you have the Vatican, a city within a city with its own autonomy that is administrative of religious matters. In London, you have the City of London, the banking sector, a city within a city with its own laws. The Queen can't even visit there, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, without an invitation. Again, the seat of financial administration. In the United States, you have the District of Columbia, city within a city. Well, the United States is sort of the mercenary military wing of things, administrative things. So those 3 things those 3 cities have very specialized roles in this whole process administratively. So
and guess what? Deal. They're all and today they're all communitarian.
Yep, exactly. It's all one big communitarian administrative power block. So they're singing
the same songs from the same playbook because they are integrated, they're coordinated, and there's the seats of your global power right there.
Yep, exactly. One quick question for Mark Windows. Which version are you, Mark? Which version of Windows are you?
I'm the 2020 Corona-free version.
Okay. Very good. All right, thank you, Lark. Take care. Sorry if I took too long. I hope I didn't take too long. Bye-bye.
No, thanks for calling in. The gentleman from Arizona, if you'd like to call back in, I know you dropped a minute ago, feel free. Meanwhile, let's go to Pat in Fort Worth. How are you, Pat?
Fine. I'm going to try to get people to go back to the archives for this. It's very good. I wanted to call about something a former caller said, but I thought about this when I was on the phone, and that was in April 6, 1992, the U.S. ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights at the United Nations, and it was by a stand-up, unrecorded vote. We had one person who would have objected to that, but Jesse Helms, but he was in the hospital. And supposedly it overrides our Constitution. Okay.
Can you say what it was again? I broke up when you said it. What was it?
It was come up with in the United Nations General Assembly in 1966. Of course, in 1970, the U.S. ratified it, in April 6, 1992, by an unrecorded stand-up vote. And Jesse Helms was in the hospital, and he could not object to the fact that they said it will override our Constitution.
Okay, but what was the name of it?
Okay, UN Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
Okay.
Yeah, you heard that, Vicki? UN Covenant on Political and Civil Rights.
Civil.
Yeah,
Civil and
I'm
political.
writing it.
Civil.
Civil and political rights.
If you want to think about what you guys said before, that when I was talking about the ecumenical Catholic whatever, the ACLU.org/whatever. They say that it's anonymous. You hear it, anonymous. Privacy and technology, religious liberty, reproductive freedom, smart justice, voting rights, women's rights, and the covenant. Well, anyway, see, all of those are debatable about what is a right. You know, I think that you got to go by the Holy Bible, King James Version, because all our rights come to us from God, and we're not going to overpower God. He is still the supreme justice of this world, and as long as we keep reminding him of it, maybe he will stick up for us, you know, and all this stuff doesn't have to come down like it's coming. It appears to be that they're in charge. But I really don't know about this coronavirus thing. It's kind of weird that there are thousands of cases in Italy where the Vatican is, because, you know, all the justice as far as women's rights and rape and all that, the Catholic Church seems to slip right under it. But, you know, God sees everything. And I think this whole country, the world, especially Russia, when God starts throwing rocks at them like he did a few years ago with meteorites hitting, and China has earthquakes that kill 300,000 at a time. America is a slippery slope by trying to vote against God. He gave us the vote, and he expects us to use it. And if we don't, if we say, well, I don't like the way he holds his mouth or something, you better look at what he stands for, because the homosexuals are ready to take over the world. They've taken over Israel, practically, Tel Aviv. I mean, and they've taken over the world, and they're the devil. And the people, I'm not saying each individual person is a devil. He's deceived, but if he doesn't consider what's in the Book of Rights that God has, well, he's in trouble with God. I'm sorry. I just had to, I've been wanting to say that ever since.
There's a few important points there.
Pardon?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to be done with our implied consent. So I agree with some of what you're saying there, because our inalienable rights cannot be taken away, but we can consent to have them taken away. I think it's very important.
Well, God can show us what our rights are, so we need not try to push them on him. He has the final authority. I'm telling you, he can get the whole world's attention at one time. It looks like he's got it right now.
Well, if we take our rights from the Bible, then we have inalienable rights, yeah.
Well, only the rights that are in the Bible will ever, if we remind him of his word and do vote. When we have a chance, try to clean up the vote so that they can't just say, oh, well, duly elected. No, sometimes it was duly cheated into, and people need to wake up. They just need to wake up. And maybe if they can't go to work, maybe if they can't go to a ball game, and talk about what the boys are doing, the NFL or whatever, you know, maybe they'll have to sit home and think, especially if they listen to y'all, maybe. People like y'all.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much for that, Pat. Good contribution.
We need to sit here and think. think. That's what we need to do. Think.
Yep. Along that same line, let me share. Thanks for calling, Pat. That was good remarks. Appreciate it. I want to share with y'all something just real quick. You know, there's something called the buy-in. I know whether that would be the public acceptance. a lot of times there really is no public acceptance of anything. It's all manufactured. Just like when we think about the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution. The problems are manufactured. The reaction is anticipated. Both sides, all sides are controlled of the expected reaction to that manufactured problem. Or yes, because at the end of the day, they have a predetermined solution in mind. And this is how we get led along in history along a particular path that is not our own. In the communitarian's mind, the buy-in has already and successfully been engineered. So now the slaves, that would be you, that would be me, everyone listening, can implement the vision. The corporatist model of governance utilizes a corporate framework to impose its caste system on everyone who chooses to engage in contract, a type of voluntary servitude, if you will. It's no wonder why the trend towards privatization of government. The corporate business model is well entrenched as a fact of life in the public mind, which is to say it's readily accepted, and therefore it's the ideal vehicle for those hell-bent on monopoly and your acquiescence to their communitarian system of global governance, their management system, so that today you and the community can better place a stranglehold, a death grip on this world. And to that, I'd like to suggest that you all take a look at a book that you can read for free on the internet. It was written in the 16th century. It's simply entitled The Politics of Obedience, the Discourse of Voluntary Servitude. Are you volunteering yourself into slavery? We must ask. And then these two quotes, very brief, from the law, written in 1850 by Frederick Bastiat while he was still in university. As long as it is admitted that the law may be diverted from its true purpose, that it may violate property instead of protecting it, then everyone will want to participate in making a law, either to protect himself against plunder or to use it for plunder. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it.
Boy,
that's from the law.
That really describes it, doesn't it?
It sure as hell does.
Definitely.
And these are books written in the 18th and 19th century that you can read for free on the internet. They're not even very lengthy. But when I say that we can liken this entire system to a tripartite equation, socialism, however you want to describe it or define it, equals gangsterism, organized crime made legal, equals slavery.
Well, talking of that, Lark, it's interesting. Several of your callers there referred to the United Nations, and I'd just like to bring something up from the UN Charter of 1947. That lady previously was talking about the UN, but this is from their Charter of 1947. The UN and its agencies, properties, and assets, wherever located and by whomsoever held, are immune from every form of legal process, search, requisition, or confiscation, from any form of interference, whether by executive, administrative, judicial, or legislative action. They can freely move funds, gold, or currency between countries, will be immune from taxation, or immune from prosecution, but can themselves bring legal proceedings. So how much more do we need to know?
Yeah, I also want to mention another YouTube video that y'all can watch that I think is quite insightful. It's simply entitled 700 Years Banking Cabal by William Stewart. That's the number 700. 700 Years Banking Cabal by William Stewart. And then also the aforementioned Best Evidence channel and the research of John Titus. Remember, whoever wields the power of the purse wields the power of the sword. And this system goes back a long ways. You know, I think it's really true that we have a system in place which we can liken to feudal or neo-feudalism as it's styled today. Let's go back to the phones, y'all. We've got Chris in Las Vegas. How are you, Chris?
I'm wonderful, and I'm dazzled with the array of guests that you have with you today. Vicki and Mark are very astute and excellently informed contributors that fit right well on the Republic Broadcasting Network with you.
I like to know smart people, Chris.
I agree. If we travel with dogs, we wake up with fleas. Maybe we'll get a little smarter if we hang out with some people of your caliber there. My observation is this. The Anti-American Bar Association has assimilated all separated powers under their private association bar, which is not there's no license for bar practice. It's merely a union dues ticket, as most of you know. Yeah. Further, we are experiencing a tyranny of the judiciary on a global basis. And so it is very, very dangerous in these days because, as Bastiat, you pointed out, wisely observed, plunder has become a way of life. The bar has authorized itself to plunder, rob, rape, and pillage the people. They're stealing homes right and left, throwing widows out on the streets. And we're going to wake up homeless on the land that our forefathers died and spread their blood for in the way it was forecast by the founding fathers.
Yeah, so we were warned, weren't we?
Yes, ma'am, we were. And so this is a really, really dangerous time. They are trying to provoke us all on the whole planet to violent rise up so they can crush us like bugs, like they like to pretend that we are. But I'm interested in your comments. Thank you.
No, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, there's nothing to argue with there. I mean, he's absolutely right. I wrote an article a few years ago called Empire of the Black Robes. And it is how basically the world is going to be ruled by judges. Because they're the ultimate arbiters of everything, right? And you just keep going up to the top court's in The Hague. And so the world will be the empire of the black robes.
And the irony of it all, Vicki, is that most of these people have experienced trauma-based mind control and programming. It started out when they went to law school. You know, they learned about the rules of court, the rules of criminal and civil procedure. They learned about the rules of evidence, and then they learned about case law, stare decisis. And, you know, they had to cram. You know, it's quite arduous to go through law school and then to take the bar exam. And then look what happens to doctors, you know, when they serve their residencies. These people are cramming all the time. They seldom have the opportunity to really question the authority figures, those other doctors, those law professors and the like. And so, in my opinion, just as Chris elucidated, what we have today, what you elucidated, Vicki, is we've got really a criminal protection racket. And people, I'm sure, would like to extricate themselves from it. I remember on the very first broadcast I ever did on RBN, there's an article, I think her name was Margot Lane, and she talked about the fact that she was a practicing attorney, and she did, in fact, realize that she was part of a criminal protection racket.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sad but true. Good observations, Chris and Vicki. I think the truth is that we get conscripted to evil quite easily in this world, especially when we ally ourselves to any kind of a collectivist entity. That could be a syndicalist trade association. It could be a trade union. It could be a white-collar trade association like the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National Governors Associations, and the like. There's many syndicalist organizations just like this. But when you're not in charge of your own destiny and you're not making decisions for yourself, you're giving in to somebody else's authority. Hold that thought, Mark, and we'll take this break. And we'll be right back. Hold on, Fred. We'll get to you in just a moment. What really happened? Lark in Texas filling in once again for Michael Rivero. Mike will be back on Monday. And we're joined today by Vicki Davis in Idaho, USA, and Mark Windows in the UK. We also have on the line, I think we have Chris. Stay on the line if you wish, Chris. And let's bring up Fred in Michigan next. Wolverine, Fred, how are you?
Hey, Lone Star Lark. Okay. The C word, there's a parallel called cancer, the big C word in that realm of the communitarian, well, what shall we call it now? Fraud, death agency certified, pharmaceuticidal, medicide, chem-med, poison pushing establishment. So cancer, and I see communitarianism as the overarching cancer that plagues mankind on planet Earth. And just like the physiologic anomaly called cancer, it's reproducing out of control. And the best way to circumvent and terminate it is to shut off, terminate its fuel energy source. Don't have to kill it. Don't have to burn it, poison it, yada, yada. All you got to do is terminate the energy source. Which is
I think Mark described it very well. He called it the globalist mind virus. Look it up, y'all, on YouTube. It really is. This is a meme. It's a destructive meme. Remember, a meme is a unit of cultural replication. A meme is a mind virus. And you can actually read a book on the internet. You can read the reviews on Amazon by Richard Brody. It's called Virus of the Mind, the New Science of the Meme. Remember, I shared with you the quote from Callie Lasson of Culture Jam, Adbusters earlier. We're in a mimetic war. And so long as we have careerists and credentialists and opportunists merely wanting to get ahead and be success-driven as they are, you're going to have people adopting this language, and they're going to accept this meme. They're going to become the host for this parasitic meme called globalization, totalitarianism, global governance, or communitarian governance. It's really all one and the same. They're adopting the language. And so long as we are parroting the same language that our overlords, our overseers are presenting us, then we are becoming hosts for that same parasite. So that's why you never hear me use the word community, for instance, or sustainable, for instance, without prefacing my use of that word or words with the fact that I recognize that these are parasitic mind viruses.
That's really good, Lark. That's really good. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, well, that's what's happening. We're all basically potential hosts for this parasitic meme, which is the language of the communitarian globalist. They really have a language, and we don't want, as long as we're parroting that language, we're not doing anybody any good. You know, I mean, just the use of the word community, period. I mean, we all think that we know what this word means, and it's a nice, cosseting, friendly sounding word. We like community. We like the idea that our neighbors are looking, they've got our backs and the like. But we have to remember that
like
people
over the age. Yeah, they like this word reclaim, and I think we should reclaim real language because it is a propaganda war, and we get that in the UK a lot. I get demonized for what I put out, and what they do here, as same as America, if you go against their memes, it's I suppose you voted for Trump. I suppose you voted for Brexit. I bet you think Elvis is alive and well and lives on the far side of the moon. In fact,
hold that thought, Mark. Hold that, Mark. Hey? Gentlemen, Sheldon, stay on the line.
Okay.
We'll take this break and be right back, Mark. And we are in the home stretch of What Really Happened radio show. Today we've got Mark Windows, windowsontheworld.net, Vicki Davis, Channeling Reality, also the technocratictyranny.com. governamerica.com every Saturday morning from, I think, 10 to 1 o'clock Central. And we've got a couple callers on the line. We have one more caller waiting in the wings that I want to bring in. And so let's do that now. Let's bring in Sheldon from Spokane, Washington. How are you, Sheldon?
Well, fine. I just walked in and I couldn't find a pen quick enough. Could you please reiterate that title of the 1600, something about government and behavior or something?
It was called the Politics of Obedience.
Yes, sir.
The Discourse of Voluntary Servitude by Etienne de la Boétie. Forget the French name. Yeah, you should find it easily. The Politics of Obedience, the Discourse of Voluntary Servitude. And of course, the other one is also French with the English translation. It was simply called The Law by Frederick Bastiat.
Do you have a year on that?
1850.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheldon. I hope you enjoy it. Those are good reads. They're well worthwhile.
That's tonight's entertainment. Take care.
All right, very good. Anyway, Chris, would you have some concluding remarks for our final segment today? Okay, how about you, Fred? Would you have some more remarks? Oh, okay, cool. Well, sorry, guys. I do the best I can under the circumstances. Anyway, yeah, I'm very concerned about the young people in our future. You know, I'm in my mid-60s now. I don't have children, but I do have a niece and a nephew, and they're both college educated. They're very good people. But I am opposed to slavery, and that's what I see in the offing, ladies and gentlemen. I see slavery, and we like to think that things like piracy and barratry and slavery went away, but no, I think they just assumed new guises and permutations, as I referenced earlier. Slavery never went away. Organized crime never went away. The ways of the world are still the ways of the world. But I want to remind y'all too that this is the first day of spring, and there's much to look forward to in this life. We have the seasons have changed. I see it when I walk outside. The weather has changed. The flowers are blooming. It's time to mow the lawn again. And we don't have to buy into this narrative, but we have to be aware of it. And we have to be aware of the things that we discuss here at RBN, at places like at Windows on the World and the Technocratic Tyranny, because if we're going to be engaged in this life, we have to be aware of all that surrounds us. We have to realize that a lot of well-meaning people buy into this nonsense because it behooves them professionally. John Maynard Keynes, a Fabian socialist, if you recall, in an address at Harvard University after World War II, he said the Marxian socialist had it all wrong, but the Fabian socialist had it all right. Instead of targeting the wage slaves, the people that did not own property, to win them to their cause because there was a greater pool from which to draw on, ostensibly to attack the Bastille, to storm the Bastille and remove the source of the oppressor, the monarch or the king, what have you, the aristocracy, the nobility. The Fabian socialists targeted the well-to-do, the trust fund babies, the smarter than usual people, the prettier people, the more handsome people, the people that they knew that others would look upon as thought leaders. Those are the people they targeted. And that's why you see that the most brainwashed people in our system today, in our society, are those that are the most privileged very often and the most educated. Remember, science today is physical sciences, life sciences, and social sciences. They've thrown them all together. A watchword that's very important in a communitarian world is this word socioeconomics, because both of these are pseudosciences, whether you call it sociology or you call it economics. These are pseudosciences. These are not exact sciences. So we're in a world where we have to separate always fact from fiction, truth, reality, things like that. We have to realize that they conflate terms like morality, ethics, and behaviors, attitudes, values, but they have precise meanings. Always remember too, though, they conflate the language at their will in a communitarian system. And the language oftentimes works against you because it too is a technology. Like all technologies, a tool. It can be wielded for good or for ill. So don't allow the language which is in your own head to create outposts that work against you. So I want to remind you, once again, you can write to me, Lark in Texas, at gmail.com. Simply write subscribe. I'll send to you my 9 words, which is my blueprint for remedial action. How it is that you can combat communitarian code speak. How it is that you can understand the anatomy of slave speak, which I always remind people is well worth a read. Anatomy of slave speak. You can find a version at climateviewer.com. It's very well done. Jim Lee over there has got a nice copy. And read that. Read those quotes. I think it will be helpful to all of us. Your thoughts, Vicki or Mark?
I agree with everything you just said. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, this is the spring. This is the springtime of our lives, ladies and gentlemen. It's the first day of the rest of our lives. And we can be winners. Remember, you are a oner. O-N-E-R. It's one of those crossword puzzle words, but it's in the dictionary. O-N-E-R. That's what you are. You're unique in all of creation. One of a kind.
Well, yeah, that's true. Except that in the globalist system they're building for us, we are one as a unit. A unit of slaves as one.
That's right. That's right. They want to control the narrative because this is a way that they will be able to control your mind. If they can control your mind and brainwash you, that means they can control your behavior, your actions, your activities.
Yes.
It's just that simple. And we are a social creature. We are a gregarious creature. We like to get along. It's part of our nature. But see, they use this against us. Knowing of our nature, they can use this against us and they can deceive us. And that's what this globalist communitarian agenda is all about. It's about bringing people on board. It's about engineering the buy-in. That means voluntary slavery is what they're after. They want you to volunteer yourself into slavery.
Yeah, it has to be done with consent. And I think that there's some really good points have been brought up tonight, Lark and Vicky, and the listeners that you have are very well informed. And I don't think the general public know much about this kind of word salad that is being used as a weapon against them. I mean, every single document from every single organization, every public-facing body uses the same word salads, these communitarian word salads. But I think it's time to reclaim language, actually reclaim it. I think in the UK, it's kind of funny this, the Apostrophe Society actually closed down the Society for the Apostrophe, right? Well, that's just kind of indicative of the kind of dumbing down of the language structure. But they use the word reclaim all the time, reclaim. So we need to reclaim the terms that they've hijacked. For instance, if they talk about climate change, we'll say, well, the climate always changes. What do you mean by climate change? Do you mean that anthropogenic global warming is true? Well, show me the paper which says it's true. Give me the facts. I'm only interested in the facts. Your words salads are of no consequence. And this does help you when you go into a court of law, because the words that you use are precise. And if they're used in the right way, they are extremely powerful. So I think what we need to do is reclaim language, really.
I think so. We need to remember, too, that just like, mimetic warfare is a real thing. Mimetic engineering is a real thing. It goes to meme theory. The word itself, meme, was coined by Richard Dawkins in a book that he wrote in 1976. And it was called The Selfish...
He's a useful idiot. Yeah, he's a useful idiot. That's all he is. He can't argue. Right. Doesn't really have any facts. He has to have pre-written questions that he looks at, and he's the useful idiot that's rolled out. Okay, let's use their word salads and call them useful idiots, which is actually what they are. These people, they're there for a reason. They're there pushing an agenda, and they don't have anything behind them. They have no substance.
Well, see, a lot of people, too, are flummoxed by the idea of this word thing. They associate a thing most often in their minds as something that's physical. It's not necessarily mental or intellectual. But today, on Madison Avenue, for instance, meme theory and mimetic engineering and mimetic warfare is what's discussed in every boardroom meeting. Memes are very important in modern communication, and especially via the internet.
I think advertisers have pretty much always done that, even if they didn't use the term.
I think that's true. These are the things, quote unquote, today's top tier marketers, political scientists, economists, social scientists, military strategists, and propagandists are hip to so that they can better manipulate people. Since all appeals are to logos, ethos, and or pathos, it do well for us to get hip to these things too. Remember, any appeal that is made to you appeals either to emotion, your sense of reason, or your sense of ethical appeal. Communitarians, whether they are cognizant of their new label or not, are often unwittingly made a party to such arrangements and schemes. When big money enters into the group picture, you have the makings of a large-scale, often malevolent, mimetic marketing campaign, or campaigns that are waged like warfare in this our media-saturated, big data-driven information age. There you have it in a simple nutshell. Let's bring up Howard in, Massachusetts. How are you there, Howard?
I'm doing okay. It's we're in wild times. I've been listening for a while. It's a really good show. A lot of great stuff on here so far. But I wanted to chime in just about the language thing, and something I find incredibly baffling. I mean, there's so much conformity and groupthink, and just the propaganda. Like, it's amazing what people are believing now. I mean, it's really breathtaking how easily people are led around by their nose. Because whatever, this or that, they said this, or, and these media outlets talk to people like we're children, with this propaganda. But anyway, the thing that is most mind-blowing to me is people not using the word I anymore, like at all. Like, love it, all this kind of thing. No one uses I anymore. I mean,
that's interesting. I have no...
Oh, it's
Go ahead,
6
Vicky.
months ago. I wrote oh, sorry, my bad.
No, go ahead. I just was commenting. That's really an interesting observation.
Yeah, definitely.
I hadn't paid attention till he said that.
Howard, as you were making those remarks, I'm looking at an article here by one of these local freebie magazines you get in your, health from your health food store and your mailbox, whatever. This one's called Natural Awakenings, by the way. Okay. The title of the article is entitled "The Emerging Power of We," quote unquote, Awakening to the evolution. Awakening to the evolution of community.
That's just funny. It's funny to me. I mean, it's scary, but funny.
Probably written by somebody that went to university. He's probably, 28 years old or something.
Right.
Can individuals work collectively? Yeah. Individuals need to work collectively, but they don't need to be part of a collective hive mind, really. That's what it's about, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that you can get an entire population to not use, because 6 months ago I thought I'd reached the breaking point where I was getting a little bit tired of it. I'd see Love It, or there's just dozens of cases where they're just no one's using I, or they're not even using any pronoun or at all. But then people that I never thought would, people that might be older who just seemed they wouldn't start catching on with this because they've been around too long and they're 55 and they didn't get indoctrinated, but they're just going along with it too, like parrots. And then I started to get freaked out. And then you think well, no one can even write a sentence with a grammatic, I love, whatever, art or something, And so now you're well, actually, if you say love art, you're now telling me to love art. It becomes a command word, It's ridiculous. An entire language is basically on its face, through some introduction of whatever subtle, thing this is, but it's taken over. It's amazing. That's pretty much all I had to say, but thanks for this.
Now I'm going to be watching for it all the time because
you'll see it.
Yeah, it fits with the reconditioning of people, the redefinition of society and communitarianism. And that's probably why I'm a contrarian, because I've never been a joiner. I just can't be a joiner. I am just me. And so
I want to remind you all before we're running out of time that there is such a thing as cybernetics and cybernetic theory. I would recommend that y'all look up something called the Coalescence of Cybernetics. Go to the website that is by the American Society of Cybernetics. Take a look at the timeline, because when we talk about biological inputs, this speaks to what cybernetics is all about. It speaks to the marriage of man and machine. And this is something worthwhile to bring into the discussion, perhaps on a future episode. Again, Howard Rafa made these comments. I think of myself as a decision analyst who believes in using subjective probabilities. I would prefer being called a subjectivist than a Bayesian. He also said, I got an idea. Call it applied systems analysis, because nobody will know what it means. We had a clean slate. And this is what brought together these experts, these scientists, these eggheads at those Macy conferences post-World War II. And they decided, since they could not speak intelligently or intelligibly to one another because their language is so specialized, that they would discuss the nature of control, because all of them had an interest in the nature of control. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it's about being in control of your life.
That's why I'm so horrified by the systems that they're building for society, because the systems that I worked on within corporations were systems of control, and they were totalitarian systems. The systems analysts made the decisions as to what the employee would input to the system, what their function would be, based on what the corporation wanted, So I'm horrified that they are implementing these kinds of systems society-wide and globally.
Well, it's up to us, the ones who are getting informed about these things, to remember, first day of spring, ladies and gentlemen, first day of the rest of your life. And despite what they're throwing at, we all have minds of our own. We really do. We really do. Mark, I want you to promote your websites and your podcast and your your live stream real quick before we run out of time, and Vicky the same.
Okay, thanks, Lark. Yeah, every Wednesday, 8 p.m. GMT on YouTube. That's a live stream, which stays there, obviously. And every Sunday, 9 p.m. GMT, that's at windowsontheworld.net. We have a chat box there. We have a chat box on Wednesday. And the audiences are growing because we're getting more resistance from people in sort of think tanks and NGOs who are cottoning on to the fact we're having an effect. So they're actually bringing in more listeners. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
That's
wonderful. Now, Vicky, you're the same. I want you to promote your websites and what you do on Saturdays with your radio show.
Okay, my website is, my new one is thetechnocratictyranny.com. My old website is channelingreality.com. And I do a radio broadcast with Darren Weeks called Govern America, and you can go to governamerica.com every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Central. Is it 10 a.m. Central? I know it's 9 o'clock Mountain Time.
It's 10 o'clock Central to 1 o'clock Central.
That's
Yep, very good.
3-hour program.
And I'm quite the fan of both of these folks, ladies and gentlemen, for whatever that's worth. I want to remind you, I like to communicate with people one-on-one. I like to be helpful to people. What I'm interested in is focus groups, mastermind groups. I did study marketing for a time. I'm very interested in bright people coming together because I don't think that we are waging this war in a way that it can be waged if we could simply bring together the brightest minds amongst us and create these mastermind groups, these focus groups. These are integral to any kind of successful marketing campaign. And remember, marketing today is not just about selling products and services. It's about selling ideas. And right now, the communitarians are winning because you have all the best and brightest amongst us that have been brought under their tent because they want to be seen as being on the side of the winners. And so they're working against us. But we are much greater in number. And we do have a collective force if we can bring that to bear. The most important thing that we can remember is that this is our lives. This is your life, the life of your loved ones, your friends, your neighbors, that matters. And yes, these issues that we talk about here on this broadcast, on this network, they do matter. They matter because we're not having these conversations often enough. We're just really not. But we can change these kind of things if we can simply realize that most people simply don't have the time to invest, to learn about the things that most of us listening, the three of us on the phone here today, on Skype here today, are aware of. So because we have this advantage, then we need to have a sense of responsibility and duty to our progeny, to our friends, our loved ones, to spread the word. And I want to thank both of you all for joining me today. You've made it a whole lot of fun for me. And thanks for our callers and you two listeners. Stay tuned for John Stabmiller and the National Intel Report. And we'll catch y'all on the flip-flop.
Thank you, Lark.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.